Hey guys, and welcome to the second Windows 8.1 tutorials. So we're obviously now moving on to playing around with some tools and the properties. I have decided that, if you've got previous experience doing Windows Phone or anything else kind of C# related in Visual Studio around the kind of Microsoft SDK, you might notice that a lot of it's the same with events and things like that, but I'm going to show people who don't have any idea quite what you can do, So let's start off with some of the simple things. A lot of the things that people normally want to use would be something like a button. So obviously on your left here you have your toolbox. Typically it's down the side like this. You can't actually see it to start with. You'll see toolbox. If you click on that, it opens up, and if I was you, I would just pin it so that it is stuck to the side of your development area, so that it's very easy to keep bouncing backwards and forwards to, because there's nothing more annoying than it keeping disappearing down the side. It just winds me up. So if you want to add a new tool, what you want to do is just go ahead and grab whatever it is you want and drag it onto your display. So now we've added this button, so you've got a few things that you're going to want to do to start with. In the top right of the properties menu, which is down here in the corner, you'll find that it is called it's not even called anything, it's just got no name, which means it has no identity. And as you can see in the code below, there is no name for it, and there is no way of us referencing it unless we did it through an event. But I'll explain that in a minute. So what typically you want to do is just, for example, call it my button, and I'm going to call it my button 1. So now you can see down in the code below, our button now has a name, which means if we wanted to, if we go into the into the code, and we type in my button, we now have my button 1, and we can actually then change its content, for example, or do something to it, which before we couldn't do because we had no way of identifying that button from anything else that may be on the display. So now we'll throw down a text block, and we've done this. We can probably do one of the little hello world kind of examples where I'll change the text, but I'll do it more with some explanation behind the events. So we're going to call this my text block because it's a text block. And we're going to just set the text to button has not been pressed. And we'll just put full stop there. So that's on our screen now. You should see that we have a button and some text that says button has not been pressed. Now I'm going to center that just because I feel like it. Not really necessary, but there we go. Right, so obviously, as you can see, I'm kind of just darting around in this bottom corner. This is typically where you can do a lot of things. So if you wanted to change the size of your text, for example, you just go into the properties area, open up the text tab here, and you've got the size, the font type, and then if you go to the little tab along, you've got the ability to left, right, justify, or center the text on the screen. You've got layout. Layout is quite important if you're doing an application which is going to cater for multiple resolutions, because if you've got a massive resolution or a small one and your button is set to 300 pixels, it will only ever be 300 pixels on that machine, which means it could end up tucking itself right up in the top corner, or it could end up stretching itself halfway across a low resolution screen. So it's quite important with layouts. For example, if I set the width to auto on this, it's now going to set itself only to the length of the text, and the same with the button. If I set this to auto on here, what you'll find is the text again, it's only as wide as the text on the button. But if I click, it says 80 pixels, but if we click away, it'll actually come up as auto brackets 80. It's telling you it's 80 pixels, but it's been done automatically. So if I set it to 82, it's going to get bigger, and it's no longer an automatic value, which means that it will always be that big, even if the text is to change. Whereas if you have the button set to automatic on width, then you click on the button, you could have it change the content of the button to a much longer text string, and the button would cater for that and stretch. Otherwise it wouldn't be readable, it wouldn't change size, and it would just be horrendously badly made. So then we've got some other settings. I dragged it onto the desktop, onto the screen, like this, and because I've dragged it on here, I've in essence giving it its left and top value. So at the moment its left is 266 and its top is 57. That means that whatever resolution, again, that is where the button's going to put itself. It's always going to put itself 266 pixels from the left and 57 from the top. So we could stop that if we wanted to by setting the margin values to 0, and we could say every time every time this is displayed, I want my button to be exactly in the center at the top. So you just use the horizontal alignment. Now the reason we had to set the margin values to 0 is because if left still had 200 pixels in it, it will center the button to the center of the screen and then set its left value to 200. So for example, if it was set to the left still, it comes 200 pixels away from the left point. Once we set it to center, it will now set itself 200 pixels away from the center of the screen. So we should always set these to 0 to make sure that the button remains in the middle. And then you could even do the vertical alignment, so your button is dead center on any screen of any resolution size. Okay, so that is basically the first part of this. I'm not really bothered about where my button is because we're not going to be playing with multiple resolutions in this video. So I'm just going to put my button back there. Okay, so that's just a simple bit of the layout. So if we go to the button, you've got some different options as you do to the text. So if you went to the common value of the text, you've got the actual text value of what's going to be on, the text block. Whereas if you're on button, under common, you have click mode, which would be, what is going to actually set this off. Is it when you actually click down on the button, or is it when you release from the button? And then you have the content to tell you what's actually on the button. So this is my button. So as you can see, my button text is now this is my button. If you click on here and you go to the little lightning strike, you'll notice that you've actually then got a whole list of events. Now there are some events on here, for example, click, which if you went onto the text block, doesn't exist. So if we don't have the option to click on our text block, there's obviously a reason for that. That's because there isn't a click event that can be used. But we can use the click event on our button because that is how it works. So if we then look at, we've got a option under text block, is it tapped? Yes, we have a tapped option on the button, and we also have a tapped option on the text block. So for people who decide that they do actually want to have the ability to tap their text for some reason, you can actually simulate a very similar event to the button. But the reason you have the click event is because you can choose, what release type and things like that for this button, and hovering and other bits like that. So basically what I'm trying to say is there is multiple different events for different tools. So we'll go ahead and I'll just show you something now with a text box. Now text boxes are great because obviously that's where people enter their information into. You can make logins out of them or enter values of whatever. So here we've got the text block just saying text box, sorry. Again, different options here because we've got options like read only. So whereas this text block can't be changed manually, you can't just tap on that and type a new text in. But if you click onto the text box, they can then obviously type their own value into here. But we might not want that, so you've got options like is read only or accepts return, which is basically enter. So you could actually use the enter key to complete a bit of code, other things like that. So then also, because of the fact that this is a text box, we have things like key down, key up, which we wouldn't have had on text block because there is no element of actually typing in. I mean, there is actually, as it so happens, a key down and a key up. But when you're not on focus of it, which you are on a text box, you can actually then set the key event so you could stop people entering a / or a full stop and things like that. So you could choose keys that you don't actually want it to use. And you would just do that simply by taking a key event. But again, I'll go over more detail on those kind of things in another tutorial. So what I find with the text box, is basically when you've got an application like this and you run it up in the simulator, you like to give the user an idea of what they're going to be doing. So just as an example for one of the events, when I click in this box, this text remains in here. Now it was being helpful and it was telling me what to do, but now it's just inconvenient and I have to delete it to type in what I actually want to put in there. So there's a way to solve this, and the way I do it in 8.1 is I use the focus. So there should be a focusing point. Yep, I got focus. So if we just go ahead and double click in this box, we've now been given our code as we wanted for the got focus part of the text box. And what we're going to do is we're then going to put in a bit of code here, which is very simple. So first thing is to set an if statement to determine our text box text, and we're going to check if our text box text is equal to this first string. So if it matches the string, then we've got the if statement that we wanted, and it will run the code that's in this section here. If we don't have the text equal to this, then it won't actually do anything. It will just continue running, which will actually end up doing nothing because there's nothing else in this code at the moment. So what we're going to use this for is just basically to get that first bit of text out of the display so that people can just tap and type their username in and they know what they were supposed to be doing with it. So as you can see, we've checked it is equal to enter username, and if it was, then we just literally set the text to nothing. So what we'll do is we'll just hit the simulator, have a little check. So in essence now, if we click on this, what we should get is the text to vanish. So we can see it wants us to enter our username. We click and it's deleted itself. So now we know what we were to do there. So now what you could do if you wanted to is when it loses focus, if the box is empty, when it loses focus, then it could enter the message back in there again. So they could keep clicking and unclicking and it would appear and disappear until they type in their username. So, I mean, that is probably long enough and boring enough if you just want to get on with some coding. It's just trying to help you get your head around it. Once you've kind of got this part of it in kind of hand, you can see that there's a lot you can do and you can work out yourself. So you know that you've got a lot of them speak for themselves. So if, for example, on the button you've got things like got focus, you know that that's when the attention is kind of brought to the button. You know that you've got key down, key up. You know that obviously that means when someone pushes a key down or when someone lifts a key up. Not that that's relevant on a button really. Loaded, when it appears on the page basically. You know, all these different types of things. When you've probably got like pointer, where is it? Pointer, enter, exited, move, pressed, released. So you can determine at what point they're clicking or tapping on a button. And then, you know, once you double clicked it, it will run the code for you, and you can just do inside these segments what you want with it. So I kind of hope that was a help towards, you know, developing further your application. Just, you know, mess around with it. And as I've shown you, you've got a way of setting the text of your text area. So why not try setting, for example, this text block we put down. Try setting the text of this text block to whatever you enter into this text box. So you would just set the text block text equal to the my text box text, and you could obviously do that off of your button with your click event that you created earlier up here. So go ahead and give it a try, see how you get on with it. Message me if you have any problems, drop a couple of comments, let me know what you think of the video. Check me out on Twitter, you know, Facebook, Patreon page, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.